Clemson, Ohio State, because that is a shocker. I picked Ohio State to at least cover the game. I thought they actually would win the game, to be honest. Promise is not, hindsight. It's Higgies Pickies is documented. It's on there. But to dominate the way they did, I did not see coming. 49-28 over the Tigers. Total domination by Ohio State. Very impressive win by them. But I want to look at this more from a Clemson perspective. Because I put this loss, honestly, squarely on Dabo Swinney's shoulders. He put his team in almost an impossible situation with his chirping, with his trash talk, that I really did think in the end cost his team the game. Now, someone who doesn't think that his trash talk put his team in a bad situation is Dabo Swinney himself. Of course he wouldn't think that. Here's him post-game explaining that his words, right, when he ranked Ohio State 11th in his coach's poll and basically doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down on that, openly discussing leading into the game that Ohio State didn't deserve to be in the playoff. Dabo Swinney said, after the game, my words, they had no real impact on the game.
No, I don't regret any of that. And, the polls have nothing to do with motivation. Both teams were highly motivated to play. And listen, they're a great team. As I said, that had nothing to do with Ohio State. I said they were good enough to beat us, good enough to win the whole dang thing.
Number one, and welcome to the All-State.
I didn't think anybody that didn't play at least 9 games, in my poll, that I wasn't going to put them in the top 10.
So Dabo Swinney, of course, his words were no motivating factor. Didn't have any impact on the game at all. Didn't fire up Ohio State. Didn't really give them some extra incentive to try to win the game. Well, he's in denial. Because that is honestly not the case. I told you, one of the reasons why I was picking Ohio State to win, because I truly believed in the emotional aspect, especially in college football. The pros, okay, it's one thing. It's a little bit different. But when you're dealing with 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, 21-year-old kids in college who, sure that their goal was to make money going to the NFL, but they are not getting paid. Maybe as corny, as cheesy as this sounds, you are still playing with a lot of pride, a lot of emotion in that game. And coming off last year, right? You already had motivation for how last year's game against Clemson in the playoff ended. Questionable officiating, that heartbreaking interception by Justin Fields as the team is going down the field to try to take the lead and win the game. They were fired up to play this game anyway. And to just give them that extra motivation, to drive, the knife a little bit deeper to open the wound. That did Clemson no good. Because guess what? Even if Clemson won this game, the only way Dabo would be validated is if Clemson blew out Ohio State. When you are chirping as much as you did, when you are constantly saying almost daily that Ohio State didn't deserve to be in the playoff, you rank them 11th on your poll, he can make the argument that, it's just because of the amount of games they played, whatever, it's not fair, this and that. He is openly disrespecting the Buckeyes. And guess what? Guess who heard those chirps? Guess who took it in a disrespectful way? Guess who took it personally? Ohio State. Because guess what happened after the game? They were quiet all week. Ryan Day only said nice things about Clemson. Players were quiet. No one was really feeding into the bulletin board material. Pre-game, right? Leading into the week. Dabo was talking, pontificating daily about how Ohio State didn't deserve to belong. What did Ohio State do? They kept it internal, and when they won, they let the world know about it. Ohio State football Twitter account, their official Twitter account, after the game tweeted a picture with the only comment being, quote, 11. Obviously indicating what Dabo Swinney ranked them in their poll. Garrett Wilson, a young, good receiver for Ohio State, tweeted after the game, hey, coach, you still think we're ranked 11th? But here is the biggest indictment about Dabo Swinney's words and how it cost his team. Urban Meyer was at the game, right? He was covering the game for a Big Ten Network. He was doing the post-game in the stadium. He had an interesting anecdote that he shared post-game on Big Ten Network about how Dabo Swinney's words impacted the Buckeyes. Here's what Urban said after the game.
A lot of times you have to motivate a team when you're playing a team that's lesser than you. But when you're playing a team that's even with you, it's all about preparation. And we all know what happened last week. The Buckeyes in one practice had 41 players because of COVID and other stuff going on. A lot of it added morale because players had to be away from their families during Christmas. And I was talking to Coach Day and some of the other coaches, and then something happened. And disrespect, that when Coach Swinney came out and ranked them 11th behind Iowa State and Coastal Carolina.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to make too much of that, but you try to get your teams to practice the best you can. I can tell you, I was told they had the 3 best practices they've had in a long time right after that.
3 best practices they've had in a long time after Dabo Swinney comes out and says they're ranked 11th. And look, I mean, Urban Meyer's a guy who you would think's in the know. Think would know a person or two on that program that have the pulse of the program and how practice is going leading up to that game. So yeah, Dabo can be in denial. He can tell you that his words meant nothing. No way, he doesn't regret it. No way that had an impact on the game. But Ohio State football account told you it had an impact on the game. Players tweeted that had an impact on the game. Urban Meyer told you they had some of the best practices they've ever had after listening to what Dabo Swinney said. So sure, you could still say, oh, that doesn't really matter. You're playing hard anyway. You're in the playoff. You're motivated to win. They just had a great game, and Clemson came out small, and that's just how it goes sometimes. But I'll sit here and tell you, this, again, is squarely on Dabo's shoulders. He added fuel to the fire that already was burning from Ohio State from what happened last year. And he put his own team in a position where their backs were almost against the wall. Because, again, when you're a coach, could you imagine, right? If you're a Clemson quarterback, if you're Trevor Lawrence, if you can put yourself in Trevor Lawrence's shoes or Travis Etienne's shoes or just any player on Clemson, right? You're sitting there, you're minding your own business, you're just trying to get ready for the game, and you have your own head coach saying that Ohio State doesn't belong. I'm ranking them 11th in my poll. This is going to be a quick study for the game because they only played 6 games. It's not fair that Ohio State's in the playoff. Do you know how much pressure that adds to your play? Because now you're the one that's going to go back up your coach's words. You're going to have to be the one that's going against now a player on the other side who heard your coach say that week in and week out, day in and day out leading up to this game. And now you have to go answer for that because your coach, again, was running his mouth. And it's got to the point where, again, obviously it's the playoff, you win and you move on. But even if this game was close, Dabo is still going to take some heat because, again, when you talk all that much leading up to a game, and we never really see that, right? We never see that from any real head coach in any sport leading up to a big game where he is openly chirping the other team. I'll tell you, I think it had a massive impact. I do. Urban Meyer's telling you they had some of the best practices they've ever had. Right after Dabo Swinney said what he said. You can call it a coincidence. You can do what you want. That's why I'm putting this loss squarely on Dabo's shoulders because he put his players in an impossible situation. One that they couldn't really, get past. So to me, that's why it's on Dabo. That is why this loss is squarely on his shoulders. He is the one to blame. Not Trevor Lawrence, not the receivers, not the defense. This is on Dabo. And by the way, before we get out of here, Justin Fields bandwagon. I tried to tell you about Justin Fields. A lot of people jumped off the bandwagon after his game against Indiana, after his game against Northwestern. I tried to warn you. Justin Fields, he is a damn good quarterback. He has talent. He has a ton of skill. And he put one of the best performances we will ever see in a playoff on display for us. So just remember, the Justin Fields bandwagon, already full. No more passengers are being allowed on this time. We apologize. The bandwagon is already full. It's moving on. It is moving on to Alabama. Speaking of Alabama, they beat Notre Dame 31-14. My big thought and takeaway from this is that, sure, a lot of people want still want to bag on Notre Dame. All of the questioning about, to Brian Kelly, should say, after this game was Notre Dame, they lose at another, big stage at the playoff, BCS, New Year's Six Bowls. They're 0-7 now. The last 7 times they've been on this stage. Does Notre Dame belong? It's the same song and dance every single time they lose a big game. But let's just call for what it is. Let's just be objective here. Notre Dame lost, sure. No one really expected them to win. No one even thought, honestly, they would cover the 20 points. But it's not just a Notre Dame thing. Whoever was at 4 seed, whether it was A&M, Cincinnati, whoever, Coastal Carolina, Oklahoma, you could put any team you want in that 4th spot. The result would have been the same. Maybe arguably even worse. Because to me, Notre Dame in this game, despite losing by 17, proved they belong. Again, I understand it's tough to kind of justify that when you lose a game by 17 points. But let's also look at what they did. They held this high-flying Alabama offense to just 31 points. Now, I understand it's still a lot. But you put it in this perspective, that's their lowest point total that Alabama has scored in a game since their 2018 national title loss to Clemson. 25 games. Alabama scored more than 31 points in a row. Until Friday. So again, to me, watching this game, it's not a Notre Dame problem. They put up a fight that I didn't honestly expect. This problem is bigger than Notre Dame. This is a college football problem. Because right now, the gap between, let's say, Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State, and everybody else is pretty wide. It is a pretty big gap. I think Notre Dame legitimately is a top 5 team. There's really no argument there. The last few years, they have been right there at the top. They are legitimately top 5. If you want to be generous, or if you want to be strict, I should say, top 10 program. Legitimately. And they were, to me, the 4th best team in college football this year. But then look at that. They lost by 17. And people are impressed that they lost by 17 to Alabama. That's not a Notre Dame problem. That's a college football problem because guess what? No one was going to go into that game and win. Honestly, I'll ask you this. If you think Notre Dame didn't deserve to belong, they think, okay, this is classic Notre Dame, blown out another big game. Who was going to be that 4 seed that was beating Alabama? Who in college football outside of Ohio State, outside of Clemson, could compete on the same field as Alabama this year? Please let me know. Facebook Worldwide Sports Network, Twitter WWSRN_radio, at Ryan Hickey Show on Twitter. Who was going to put up a better fight against Alabama in that game than Notre Dame? Because I'm not seeing any team in college football. It's a college football issue that they've allowed the gap between these 3 teams and everyone else to grow so wide that now we are praising Notre Dame for losing by 17 points. So to me, this is a step in the right direction for Notre Dame. You got to, crawl before you can run, right? Before you can win a title, you at least got to play close games. Before you can win a game, you got to play close games. They're getting there. They're getting better. But this, to me, it was all about Alabama. That's how much better they are than everybody else. When they have an off game, when they kind of play okay, they still win by 17 against a top 4 team in the country. That is the bigger issue in college football. Not Notre Dame coming up small in another big game. That even when Alabama plays their, let's say, B-plus game, they win handily over a top 4 team in the country. So I'm curious. You watch college football play. What was your big takeaways? Can Ohio State beat Alabama in the national title? Was this Clemson loss on Dabo Swinney's shoulders? Did he put them in an impossible situation? I'm saying yes. I think he really put his team in a bad situation that, guess what, Ohio State took advantage of and smoked them. Smoked them.